I'm going to tell you about an experience I had last year, during winter. It was early in the morning, just after rain. The air was still. There was no wind, no people around, and everything had that quiet, wash-clean feeling you sometimes get after some rain. It was still early. I took the dogs out for a walk and headed down toward an intersection where a shared path crossed perpendicular to the next street. Something caught my eye, so I stopped. About 20 meters away, near a concrete post box, I saw what looked like a large transparent bubble. It was bigger than a basketball, perhaps around 40 to 50 centimeters in diameter. It was perfectly round, clear, and floating completely still about 50 or 60 centimeters above the street surface. At first, I thought it was odd but not impossible. Maybe it was just a large bubble from somewhere nearby, some kids playing in a backyard. But there were no children around, no sound, and no obvious source. The backyards were quite a distance away behind freestanding houses. The bubble simply hovered there, motionless. I watched it for about 4 or 5 seconds. Then it began to rise. It lifted steadily from its stationary position, moved up over the lawn, and then continued over the roof of the house beside it. All the while, it remained perfectly round. It did not wobble, stretch, distort, or collapse. Then, when it was above the house, still roughly 20 meters away from me, something even stranger happened. 2 smaller bubbles emerged from it. They separated completely from the main bubble, floated independently for a few seconds, and then disappeared, just like they vanished. The main bubble continued on as if unaffected. That was the point where I realized I was not looking at an ordinary bubble. It did not change size. It did not distort. It did not lose its form. It had babies. It simply continued moving in a steady, straight line above the rooftops, perhaps 15 feet or so above them, until it eventually passed behind a row of trees in the distance, around 50 meters away. Before it disappeared behind the trees, the morning sun was behind it, and the light shone through the edge of the bubble with an intense brightness. But it did not have the multicolored, oily shimmer you usually see in soap bubbles at any stage that I watched it. The edge looked clear, bright, and almost white. It was focusing the light, making it more intense. Anyone who has played with large bubbles knows how they behave. They wobble. They stretch. They drift with the air. They need uplifting wind to rise so that they don't just go straight to the ground. They pop quickly. They do not usually stay perfectly round. They do not hover motionless in still air. They do not suddenly rise from a fixed position, travel steadily in a straight line, and remain structurally intact. And, most importantly, they do not produce smaller baby bubbles. When a normal bubble is compromised, it pops. The surface tension breaks. It doesn't take long for some of the water to evaporate. The film stretches thin, and that is the end of it. It does not separate into smaller, stable bubbles that detach and then vanish while the original continues on unaffected. After the walk, I decided to test it for myself. I went home, got some children's bubble mix, and tried blowing bubbles in the backyard to compare the dynamics. As expected, they were much smaller. They drifted downward. They often landed on the grass and popped. None came close to exiting the yard, even with help, me blowing and using my hands. They did not rise steadily into the air. The larger ones did not remain perfectly round. The light on them was textured, colorful, and swirling, just as you would expect from soap film. And they did not produce smaller bubbles. I also looked up videos of large bubbles online to check their behavior. Again, the same thing stood out. Large bubbles wobble. They deform. They respond visibly to the slightest movement in the air. What I saw did not behave like that. The best way I can describe it is as a bubble orb. I had not heard of anything like that before. Most orb accounts I had come across involved glowing lights, metallic spheres, or luminous objects. I've seen some pretty good footage over the years, not just from recently disclosed files. This was different. It looked transparent, like a bubble, but behaved in a way that did not match ordinary bubble dynamics. I later told a friend about it, and he mentioned that he had once seen a glowing orb floating in a tree outside his house at night, just stationary. According to him, it remained there for more than 30 minutes, and he went outside several times to check on it. I am not claiming to know exactly what I saw, but I do know that it displayed several features that made it difficult to dismiss as a normal soap bubble. Its size, its stillness, its perfectly spherical shape, its steady rise, its straight movement, its lack of distortion, the bright clarity of its edge, and the emergence of two smaller bubbles from it, all with no wind. The whole experience had a strange quality to it. The street was quiet. The rain had just stopped. The air was completely still. There was no one else around. And as I watched it, the object seemed almost to reveal itself gradually, like communication. First appearing like something ordinary, then behaving in ways that made that explanation increasingly difficult to maintain. By the end, I had the distinct impression that whatever it was not simply drifting randomly. It felt as though it was presenting clues along the way, almost as if it wanted me to understand that I was looking at something unusual. That's why I still think about it.